Chapter 4. Lucy. Lucy could see her front gate ahead and walked faster. Would there be another one? She didn't know, but she'd find out soon enough. She had been so tempted to leave school early and see who it was, but she had no clue when they visited her house. Reaching the front gate, she paused, her hand resting on the unpainted, weathered timber. What if they'd stopped? This was the start of the third week. Surely they wouldn't keep it up forever. There was only one way to find out. Forcing herself to open the gate, she took several hesitant steps forward, letting the gate close behind her. She remained standing just inside the gate, trying to see if there was anything on the small patio. It was too shadowy. She forced herself to stride to the front door. Her heart skipped a beat as she stepped onto the concrete of the patio. It was lying against the wall, to the side of the door. A white rose barely formed. Some people might even have called it a rosebud. She glanced around. Seeing no one was about, she picked up the rose. Again she looked around. Other than the occasional car, the street was empty. Her eyes rested on the houses of some of her neighbors. They were either old people or ones with young kids, so she was probably wasting her time checking if someone was watching her from the corner of a window. She held the rose to her nose and breathed deeply. It was a light scent, just a hint of muskiness. She desperately wanted to know who was leaving them for her. If they were hanging around watching her pick them up like some of her friends thought, then she couldn't see them. They were too well hidden. Her gaze was drawn to a shady tree further up the street, surrounded by shrubs. Nothing. She couldn't see a single person. She looked at the small white card attached with a white ribbon. Only her name, nothing else. The mystery was killing her. Did she know him? How was she going to find out who it was? After another look up and down the deserted street, she unlocked the front door and headed inside. In her bedroom, Lucy ditched her school bag on the floor and added the latest rosebud to the vase sitting on her desk. There were 11 in various stages of health. One for each weekday. They never arrived on the weekend, so it had to be someone who knew her, and knew there'd be someone at home to see them leave the rose. She reached out and rubbed a waxy petal between her fingers, unable to prevent a smile from forming. As frustrated as she was also relieved. Her secret admirer looked like he wasn't going to stop leaving her roses anytime soon. Still staring at the vase of roses, Lucy tried to convince herself she should start her homework. What she would have preferred to do was find out who was sending her flowers. Maybe she could stake out a local florist. No, that'd be a waste of time since she couldn't be there constantly and she wouldn't know when to expect him. Or even which florist he used. She had no idea how to figure out who was leaving them. He didn't leave a single clue. Her phone beeped, dragging her attention away from the roses. It was Jasmine. She told her friend she hadn't expected roses this week too. That she was half certain there wasn't going to be one waiting for her. Surely he wasn't going to keep sending them forever and never tell her who he was. She read the message. Well? Her smile became a grin and she typed in the answer Jasmine had probably been waiting to hear. Yes. She was surprised Jasmine had waited this long to ask. I wish I had a secret admirer. So unfair. Tell Kurt to buy you roses. He probably doesn't even know what they are. Jasmine's words made her chuckle. Yeah, probably give you a football instead. LOL. I have to start my homework. See you tomorrow at school. Don't remind me. I've got too much of my own to do. Bye. Placing her phone on her desk next to the vase, Lucy rummaged in her school bag until she had the homework she needed. After pushing her laptop towards the back of the desk, she sat down, staring at the roses for several more minutes before she could bring herself to start. She was nowhere near finished when her sister, Leah, burst into her room. She could never look at her sister without thinking of the annoying phrase her father always used. They were not two peas in a pod. That always made her think of something fat and round. And she wasn't. Neither of them were. They had curves, but who wanted to look like a stick figure? Stop bursting into my room. She met Leah's eyes, the exact same color blue as her own. I need a favor. Leah moved to look in the mirror hanging on the wall, finger combing and rearranging her short, chestnut-colored hair. She had the same color hair as her sister, except hers was a little past her shoulders and had a slight wave to it. But just because Leah was almost her look-alike, that didn't mean she could enter her room whenever she felt like it. Knock. How many times do I have to tell you? She winced when she heard herself sounding like her mother. Leah finished rearranging her hair and turned to face her. I don't have time for that. Justin sent me a text. He's on the way. No. I haven't asked anything yet. She shook her head. I already know what you're going to ask. And it's no. This time she'd be firm. It wasn't like her sister could make her do anything she didn't want to do. Oh, come on, Lucy. We barely get any time together. Between uni, work and his brother we almost have no time alone. An hour tops. Well, maybe a bit more. We have nothing in common. I spent every minute trying to think of something to say to Dylan. There was nothing Leah could say to convince her. Absolutely nothing. She didn't owe her a single favor. You both go to school. Talk about that. Different schools. So. They're all the same. No. I'll let you wear that dress of mine you love next time you ask. Lucy sighed. She'd asked Leah 1,000,000 times and had never been allowed to borrow it. Had never really expected her to say yes. The dress was perfect. But Dylan? He was the most awkward, boring person ever. She really wanted to borrow that dress. Sometimes her sister knew her too well. The next 2 times I ask. Leah hesitated. Done. If you don't take good care of it, you're dead. Sure. Then you'd have no one to keep Dylan busy while you drag Justin off to your room. With the door shut. She couldn't help a smile at the flicker of unease in Leah's eyes. Not that she'd say anything, but she didn't want her sister thinking she could always talk her into whatever she wanted. You wouldn't tell Mum because I'd have just as much to tell her about you. Lucy shrugged and rose from her desk, taking one last look at the vase. When are they here? Leah checked the time on her phone, sliding it back into her bra, the lace edge showing at the neck of her fitted black shirt, glittery stars scattered across the front of it. 5 minutes. I need to fix my makeup. She dashed from the room as quickly as she'd entered it. Lucy stared at her open door, reluctantly walking over to it, to look down the hallway towards her sister's room. She hoped Justin and Dylan didn't stay long. She had homework to finish. Holding back a sigh, she slowly walked to the lounge room. Her eyes were drawn to the double-seater lounge chair. There was no way she was going to make the same mistake as last time. She strode towards the single-seater. Having to talk with Dylan was bad enough. She wasn't about to sit beside him too. Drumming her fingers on the arm of the cushioned armrest, Lucy tried to think of something she could say to Dylan. Talking about school was lame. She still hadn't thought of anything by the time she heard Justin's car coming down their street, the hole in the exhaust warning he was nearby. She didn't move towards the front door until the sound stopped. The last thing she wanted to do was spend any time with Dylan. She pictured her sister's dress, trying to see herself in it. The image faltered as she opened the front door and saw Justin and Dylan headed towards her, Dylan several steps behind his brother. There were some similarities between them. Both had sandy brown hair and blue eyes, but Dylan's hair always seemed greasy. They were both narrow-framed, but where Justin was wiry, Dylan appeared gangly. At the sound of footsteps behind her, Lucy turned to see her sister, a grin in place, coming towards her. "Justin!" The word was an enthusiastic cry. Lucy stepped out of the way, knowing from experience that her sister was about to launch herself at him. She waited until their kiss ended and Leah dragged Justin back the way she'd come, before she reluctantly looked at Dylan. "Hi." He mumbled something that could have been "hi" as he stared at the ground. She looked past him at the front gate they'd left open, wondering if it was too late to escape. "Probably. You coming in?" A quick nod and even quicker glance at Lucy and Dylan hurried inside, stopping by the double-seater. Lucy was tempted to say, "No way." Instead she crossed to the armchair she'd sat in while she'd waited. Dylan continued to stand, and Lucy bit back the impatient words that nearly spilled. "You going to sit?" She gestured towards the lounge chair he stood near. With a jerky nod, he almost collapsed into the seat. Why on earth did he have to come with his brother? Surely he found this as uncomfortable as she did. How was school today?" He gave another jerky nod, this one followed by a slight shrug. "Okay." His voice broke on the word. They sat in silence for several minutes, Dylan's heel tapping up and down, only the toe of his sneakers touching the carpet. Lucy stared at it. So much for her sister's suggestion they talk about school. Obviously that wasn't going well. What was she meant to talk about now? She tried to remind herself of the dress. Was it worth this agony? Possibly. Yeah, not much happens at school. It's a bit boring sometimes. Yeah. She felt like shaking him and telling him to put some effort into the conversation. Reminding herself of the dress, she remained seated. Justin better not stay too long. An hour wasn't that long. Not usually. She looked around the lounge room trying to find inspiration. There was none. I was doing my maths homework. Nearly finished it. Just stuck on the last problem." Dylan jumped to his feet in a rush. "Need some help?" The words were all run together, and it took Lucy a moment to figure out what he'd said. Did she really want him in her room? Surely letting him help her with her homework had to be better than sitting here struggling to find something to say. And she did need to get it done. She slowly nodded. "Okay." Rising to her feet, she led the way to her room, throwing glances over her shoulder to make sure he was still following.